In today's episode of the podcast, I'm sharing with you my updated thoughts and opinions on the shadow wrap heel sock knitting technique, as I have now completed 2 shadow wrap heels. I also want to give you an update on a pattern I'm writing for a really fantastic spring knit t-shirt. And towards the end of the episode, I'll be talking about an upcoming project I have plans on knitting and the corresponding knit-along to go along with that. And not only that, it is Franken Sweater pattern release day over on Ravelry and the Wool Needles Hands website, and I'm super excited and I want to chat about that just a little bit too. So if all of this sounds like just your cup of tea, get cozy and let's dive in. Hello, and welcome to the Wool Needles Hands Knitting Podcast. My name is Tayler, and I will be your host. Today's episode is going to be pretty chill and concise. I am brushing up on some of the projects that I mentioned in the last episode and giving you some updates and new thoughts that I have on some of those projects. But it's a really exciting day for me, and before we get into anything else, I want to share exactly why that is. Okay, if you've been a viewer of the podcast for a while, you are familiar with the Franken Saga. This is a series of videos I published last year around this time as I started developing kind of an improvised top-down raglan sweater that I was calling the Franken sweater. I was pulling a lot of design inspiration from other sweaters I'd knit in the past and essentially constructing something new and original from that inspiration. And what I'm wearing today is actually the product of that adventure, and an adventure it certainly was. One I really enjoyed and one I really loved sharing with all of you, but definitely one I thought was going to always just stay an adventure in my past and not necessarily become something else in the future. Well, here we are now, and today is actually publishing day or release day for the official Franken sweater pattern for the sweater you see me wearing today, and I'm completely excited about it. So if you have had interest in the Franken sweater, or you've expressed interest in the past and you would finally like to knit your own Franken sweater, you can find it now on Ravelry and over at the Wool Needles Hands website. It is called the Franken sweater. You can call it Frankie for short. It has the alias listed on Ravelry. And it is so much more than just a basic knitting pattern. It's loaded with notes and insight, giving you kind of reasons why construction is the way it is, how to modify construction for your own preferences. There are links upon links to tutorials that you may need in order to complete the sweater, or that might just make things a little bit easier for you. I introduce a few tools that you might use in future sweaters. And then of course, I provide very detailed instructions to knit this sweater. It is fantastic for first-time garment knitters because it really does hold your hand and provides a lot of scaffolding throughout the entire process. It is my goal that if you plan to work the sweater exactly as it's written, you have your hands being held and the support that you need. And it's also my goal that if you are a more seasoned knitter, or if you do want to provide your own modifications, that there are ways that you can figure out how to seamlessly include those into the design. It's an adventure still and a journey, but it is paved for you, and I am so hoping that it's one you enjoy. So if you have an interest in knitting your own Franken sweater, head over to Ravelry or the Wool Needles Hands website and download your copy. It is there for you. And also don't forget, if you would like to join over on Patreon to help support the work that I'm doing here at the Wool Needles Hands channel, the entire Franken series of videos, and that was once a week, at least 20 to 30 minute videos since the end of December up until now. You have lots of content over there to watch to kind of familiarize yourself with the process behind the development of the Franken sweater, and also just to give you a lot more additional insight into the construction of the Franken sweater and sweater construction in general. So I definitely recommend it if you're interested. It's all available over on the Wool Needles Hands Patreon. Well, enough about that. Definitely look into it. I would be honored for you to check out the Franken sweater to see if it's something you'd be interested in. It's really exciting, and it's been kind of something in the making for quite some time. Okay, I want to get right into it because I have some updated thoughts on the shadow wrap heel technique that I am using for my husband's socks. So this is a pair of vanilla socks that I am knitting for my husband right now. I am using Patons Kroy. All of this will be linked down below. Anything I mention here, it's going to be linked down below in the description. I don't always put it up on the screen, but just so you know, it's down there. I'm using Patons Kroy in a blue rag striped colorway. I believe that's what it's called. But this is where I'm at with these. I'm knitting them congruently? No, what is it? What am I doing? I'm knitting them, concurrently. Wow. I'm knitting them concurrently. So they are being knit 2 at a time, just not on the same needle. I'm using 2 separate needles and knitting about 10 rows on one and 10 rows on the other, or I give myself some kind of reasonable, like mile marker to get to, and then I go to the next one. So I'm knitting these concurrently. I have this much of each so far. Good progress. And you can see, I mean, I don't know if this is good progress. I feel like it's been kind of slow. Last week was a little busy with shop updates and preparing the Franken sweater and all of that, but you make do. And I feel like I've made some good progress. And not only that, I have done 2 complete shadow wrap heels. 1 and 2. Now, if you watched the last episode of the podcast, I shared with you, it wasn't really a gripe about the shadow wrap heel in particular. It was more about how long it took me to complete the shadow wrap heel. It took me at least 45 minutes to an hour to complete 1 shadow wrap heel on these socks. And that frustrated me a little bit because it was really daunting. But I should have really, I think anyone would say, and a lot of folks did say down in the comments, that once you do it again, it gets a lot faster. It just takes practice. And absolutely, of course, that is the case. It's the case with all things like that. And so I didn't really make kind of a solid judgment in my mind because I knew I was going to be knitting a second heel, and I wanted to wait until I had done that to really decide. And I'm really happy that, well, I was obviously going to knit a second shadow wrap heel. I wasn't going to pull out a whole nother heel technique on the second sock, but having done that the second time, it was so much faster. Well, I don't even know if it was so much faster. It was considerably or noticeably faster, but what it was more than anything was just so much easier and more efficient. And I think that's just because I've done it already and I kind of knew what to expect. And not only that, I had said a lot in the last episode whether or not I felt like the juice was worth the squeeze, which essentially means, was it worth the time it took to do it? And yeah, absolutely. I really like the seam that runs up. This is the new one, the one that I didn't have done last time. I really love the seam that runs up the side of the heel. So you can kind of see it's a nice, clean seam, no gapping, no holes, nothing like that. And it's really very nice. It's similar to the result you get from knitting a Fish Lips Kiss heel. And somebody made a comment on the last video that was like, I completely feel the same way about this person's opinion. They said that this is very much the same as the Fish Lips Kiss heel, but that they avoid the official Fish Lips Kiss heel because it's overwritten. And I don't know exactly what they were meaning by that, but every time I open up my copy of the Fish Lips Kiss heel pattern, it's so overwhelming. The whole appeal of that sock, I might be wrong, but the reason people knit that sock is because it gives you this perfect heel that fits your foot perfectly, because you create like a template of your heel and you do all of these things. And really, honestly, like, again, this might be an unpopular opinion, and I know some heel techniques fit people better than others, but at the end of the day, a heel is a heel is a heel, and all these different techniques might offer various different fit benefits to people, but I just don't think you require as many pages as that pattern has to tell somebody how to accomplish the Fish Lips Kiss heel. So I'm sorry, this is probably a little bit of a tangent that you might not agree with, but I used a tutorial for this that was over on a blog post that I'll link to down below that was very concise and cut and dry. And this is essentially the same result. And I really, really appreciate that. And again, having knit it a second time, it was so much faster and way more efficient, and I really enjoyed it. I had a lot of folks recommend Denise from Earth Tones Girl, her shadow wrap heel tutorial, and I have watched it. I watched it after I had done the second one. I wanted to knit the second one using the tutorial that I used for the first one to kind of allow a fair judgment, because it's not anything against the tutorial, but I wanted to just use that same tutorial, knit the second one, and then realize it's just a matter of doing it twice to kind of get your feet wet before, things actually start feeling efficient. However, Denise of Earth Tones Girl is fabulous, and all of her sock knitting videos and tutorials are wonderful. So I I had no doubt, and obviously I know now, that her shadow wrap heel technique is excellent. And so if you've yet to do this, I definitely recommend her tutorial. But yeah, I'm really happy with it. I will definitely be doing it on a future pair of socks for myself. And I look forward to seeing how it really fits on Brandon's feet. It is a rather deep heel. I mean, if you look at that, like that's pretty deep, but I think it's going to fit nicely. So there you have it, guys. You wanted me to give you an update on my shadow wrap heel situation. There it is. I'm really happy with it. It's definitely worth taking a look at and giving a try if you have yet to try it. So yes, in terms of my, whatever the thing I was saying in the last episode, the juice is definitely worth the squeeze when it comes to the shadow wrap heel, in my opinion. Okay, I have made progress on the little black tee. Now this is another improvised kind of design that I knit several months ago, and I didn't originally have plans on writing it into a pattern, but after having done the Franken sweater, I kind of had, I got bitten by the bug and I felt compelled to do so. So I'm knitting a second one as a way to kind of do another draft of the pattern and put everything down on paper correctly. And then I want to have it tested and then edited and all of that. So that's what this is, which is living in my gorgeous leather armlet tote from JessebelleB over on Etsy. These tote bags, by the way, guys, you need to watch my video on my favorite project bags and baskets because I talk a lot about these and others that I really love. But this is one of my absolute favorites. Look at this. If you could smell it, I'm a big fan of quality leather. It lasts forever. It gets better with age, and you'll have it forever as heirloom pieces. And I love that. And you can tell it's just whole grain, beautiful, smells fantastic. Okay, within this gorgeous bag is my little black tee. Now, the original design was black. This one is black and gray because of yarn constraints. I needed to do some striping, but for all intents and purposes, it is the little black tee. Well, said little black tee has sleeves. Doo-doo. How pretty are those? We have sleeves, folks, and not much else. I know I had said I wanted to have a little bit more of the body finished by the time this video came out. Again, this week was just a busier week. I wasn't able to get as much progress, and I wasn't going to bring this up because it has nothing to do with knitting, but it has to do with me and my creative endeavors, if you will. And I just recently bought a new acoustic guitar. So I used to dabble in acoustic guitar years ago when I had an Epiphany guitar that I had hanging in my home. That was kind of the guitar I was learning on. And that guitar is now someplace else with my mom up north in Nevada. We put it up there so that my dad would have a guitar to play when he would go up there, whatever. I have a guitar that hangs on our wall out in our den. It's not my favorite. It's an Ovation guitar with a plastic back. It's an acoustic electric guitar. It's just not my favorite, and so I would never reach for it. But I was with my dad the other day. He has a Martin guitar and it's beautiful. And I was picking around on it, and the bug bit me so hard that I bought a guitar that I would have here in my house. And so this last week, I've been kind of reteaching myself a lot of the chords. Rainbows and waiting around the bend, my huckleberry friend, river and that I used to know, and then introducing some new ones to me. So I've been kind of into that a little bit. So it's eaten into my knitting time just a smidge, but it's been very satisfying and fulfilling. Yeah, maybe I'll share more of that with you, but that's kind of what's been going on that's been exciting this last week. But I am still happy with the progress I've made here because I'm loving these sleeves. I bound off one needle size larger than the size I was using to knit the cuff because I didn't want anything to be too tight. I intentionally didn't want to use the Italian bind off technique here because I felt like that would be too loose with not enough structure, but I also didn't want to bind off too tightly here and cinch in too much on the arm. So I decided to bind off with one needle size larger. This is something I can very easily change if I don't like the way that it looks after I block it. But once I block it, I feel like it's going to block out quite nicely and be just the right fit. So I will make that determination and the choice will be whether I go back and bind off with the actual needle size I was using to knit the cuff, or if I do decide to do an Italian bind off. All of that I'll decide once the sweater is complete and I have blocked this. But I'm really happy with the sleeve in general. It very much has that gentle taper of a ringer tee, a 1970s ringer tee, like I mentioned on the last episode. It's just a really great shape. Once the rest of the body is complete, it'll all come together and be really beautiful. So that is the status on my little black tee, and the striping is coming together just so lovely. Yeah, I'm loving this. Stay posted. I'll be updating both Patreon for everybody, free members and paid patrons, as well as Instagram with some fit photos of this. And then I'm hoping to have enough of it done to try on for the next episode of the podcast. But this is going to be really such a fun one to wear, and it's such a fun one to knit. It flies off the needles when you're working on it and not being distracted by a new musical instrument you just purchased. But yeah, I love this. In terms of when this pattern will be published, I think I gave, somebody asked, several people have asked, and I said late March, early April. It may be more like the end of April because I need to have that pattern tested, and I plan on grading it out to 9 sizes, and I would like to have as many of those sizes tested as possible. So I need to do all of that first, and in order for me to do that, I have to get all of that written up. So it may be a little bit longer, but I'm hoping by the end of spring at the latest to have that pattern published. Again, I am not, I mean, I guess you could say I'm a knitwear designer, technically speaking, that I have published a pattern, but that's not what I do for a living. It's not my occupation. So this kind of thing is very much part of my hobby, if you will. It's like being an enthusiast in something. So it's not something that is my priority in terms of timeline. So I'm working on it as much as I can within my given time constraints, and I will try to have it out by the end of spring at the very latest. And I don't see any reason why I shouldn't be able to do that. So in terms of that timeline, that's what I am shooting for. If you want to help me test that, I will be giving you information about that over on Patreon as well as on Instagram, and the Wool Needles Hands newsletter as well. So you want to sign up for that to be updated on any kind of testing call. Okay, it's getting warm in here. And I was thinking there was a chance I was going to take the sweater off because it's not hot, but it's definitely not cold outside right now, and things are getting a little steamy up in here, but we shall move on. Okay, I want to share with you guys this skein of yarn. It's a skein of yarn that some of you, if you've been around for a while, are familiar with. This is a skein of Green Mountain Spinnery yarn in Weekend Wool, which is a 2-ply worsted weight yarn in the plum colorway. So I purchased this yarn, a lot of this yarn, I want to say 8 months ago, with the intention of turning it into a sweater for my husband. And it was going to be a color work sweater, and the other color I was using was this mustard color and then a gray color, and the 3 colors together, it was just, it was a whole thing that I went back and forth on a few episodes of the podcast, not being sure about it. And then I just kind of abandoned the idea of knitting a particular sweater for my husband altogether. Well, starting in March, I am beginning a Knitalong where we are working through Karen Templer's How to Improvise a Top-Down Sweater blog series. And that Knitalong is going to be hosted over on Patreon. However, I will be sharing here on the podcast episode my own progress towards creating a top-down raglan sweater, completely improvised like I've done before, but using some different techniques and following Karen Templer's blog series. And the sweater I am going to be creating through that process is a sweater for my husband. I want that process to be what I use to develop a sweater design for my husband. And so this yarn, which was intended to be used for my husband originally, is now going to be used definitely for a sweater for my husband, following the instructions, or at least kind of following the jumping off point provided by Karen Templer's blog series. If you are not familiar with this blog series, I totally encourage you to check it out. It's a free blog series that she has over on her KT Slow Closet blog. It's fabulous. If you have no experience knitting garments, this is a really great place to start because it gives you a nice crash course in top-down seamless sweater construction, and it uses a neck shaping and shoulder shaping technique that does not incorporate short rows at the back neck. I talk about this in last week's episode of the Midweek Ramble, and I talk about short rows I would say about 4 Midweek Rambles ago, and that will give you a little bit of an insight into this process. But the technique that she uses throughout that blog series incorporates something called the staggered start technique, which is something that was used quite often in the past to create top-down raglan sweaters. And so I'm really excited to kind of dive into that technique a little bit more, especially for a sweater for my husband, because I think that technique would develop a neckline that would fit him a lot better. So that is my plan. That is my upcoming plan. And that knit-along starts mid-March. We're going to start getting the ball rolling on planning and getting our yarn together. Learn more about that knit-along over on the Patreon. You can find out more about the knit-along. Just join over on Patreon as a free member, and you can see information about that knit-along and see if that is something for you. So definitely check it out. And then also the Wool Needles Hints newsletter. I'll talk a little bit about that in the issues of the newsletter. But that is what's upcoming, and that is where I am going to be developing a sweater for my husband, and then of course sharing it here with you. So that's what this yarn is going to be. I have a ton of it. It's a really beautiful yarn. It's 100% just American wool, 140 yards, and 128 meters. And then this whole hank right here weighs, I want to say 50 grams. It's a woolen spun yarn, and it's really lovely. So that is coming as soon as my little black tee is finished. I will be gearing up to knit this. Well, that is it for me today, guys. Thank you so much for taking the time to hang out with me today and listen to me ramble about my projects and my thoughts and some updates on things, and also for taking the time to allow me to share with you my kind of excitement for the Franken sweater release. It means a lot to me. I know it's self-promotion, but I'm very proud of the work that went into that and the process behind it, and I appreciate you taking the time to hear me out on that. You guys make this whole thing what it is and make it super special for me, and you mean more to me than you'll ever know. If you took value in today's video or enjoyed yourself at all, please don't forget to give the video a thumbs up. Definitely subscribe, click that little bell icon so you can be notified whenever I upload new content, which is every Wednesday and every Sunday. And this week, I actually have a little bonus video that I'm going to be kind of squeezing in between episodes to try out something new and see if it's something that you'll like. It's fun, it's lighthearted, and just, I don't know, just something fun to try. So keep an eye out for that. I'm not sure what day I'm going to pop it in, but it'll be in between the normal videos. So definitely keep an eye out for that. All right, until I see you guys again for Wednesday's episode of the Midweek Ramble, happy knitting, happy making, happy whatever it is that you're doing. Take care, be well, and I will see you soon. Bye.